Hey everyone, welcome back to another video. We're going to be looking at a Unit 6 FRQ for AP Human Geography. If you'd like to try this FRQ and do it on your own before reviewing it and going through the rubric with me, go ahead and give it a try. Time yourself for 25 minutes, just like you would be on the AP exam. Without further ado, let's get started. So this FRQ is about Boston. It's about walkability and urban sustainability, gentrification, and other urban planning concepts. Let's dive right into this. Define walkability. When we have these defined prompts, you really want to give a one, maybe two sentence concise definition that defines the term. We're not really explaining it. You're not giving the who, what, when, where, why, and how. You don't have to give any examples. Just give a definition because it says define. So that's what they want. We know that walkability is a measurement. It's a measurement of how friendly an area is to walking, how safe an area is to walking, how accessible an area is to walking. That's a word we use a lot in Unit 6 is accessibility when talking about cities. We could have said that to the degree to which an urban area supports pedestrian activity or walking through infrastructure like sidewalks, crosswalks, and mixed-use developments. We could say that how easy it is for residents to reach essential services or go to their jobs or other amenities on foot. How easy it is for people to walk around a city. How accessible it is to walk around the city, how safe it is for pedestrians to walk around a city. All of these are great definitions of walkability. Part B, explain one reason for why Boston would want to increase walkability in Dorchester and Roxbury. The two regions of Boston, they're not really necessary to answer the prompt here. You really are just answering, why would somewhere want to increase walkability? Well, they can increase walkability to attract businesses and investments to boost these local economies in Dorchester or Roxbury by creating job opportunities, improve pedestrian infrastructure like sidewalks, ensures that lower income residents who can't afford cars or gas or car insurance have better access to essential services like grocery stores, schools, and healthcare because they can walk there. Encouraging walking will reduce reliance on cars, and that can lead to lower air pollution and noise pollution. It also promotes healthier lifestyles to increase physical activity because walking is way better for you than just sitting in your car driving to work. Walkable neighborhoods foster stronger social connections by encouraging interactions as everyone's sharing the public space. People are going to interact more often. I'm from the South, so when I'm walking somewhere, it's very common for someone to say hello, good morning, and so on. That fosters community in places like parks and local businesses. Okay, and it told me the hints after we went through the prompt. Great. Some other responses. Walkable neighborhoods tend to attract more home buyers and renters. That's a feature a lot of people really like in cities is if it's walkable. And that can lead to higher standard of living and higher costs of living with higher property values and greater investment in local housing and infrastructure. Walkability often leads to more eyes on the street, quote unquote, with a lot more pedestrian activity. When you're driving down somewhere with a lot of pedestrian activities, I live on a college campus, so there are pedestrians everywhere. I'm looking for people where I'm driving, regardless if they're crossing legally or not, because there's people everywhere. So that leads to a lot more eyes on the streets, could lead to safer drivers, but it also leads to a lot of surveillance with a lot of people around. So if a crime does happen, more people are going to see it, and that can improve safety and lower crime rates. So we see that crime rates are lower in walkable areas. That's a correlation we see here. Dorchester and Roxbury have high cultural histories. We're looking at Boston particularly. So this response caters to Boston, but we see that these two regions have high cultural histories as well as other parts of Boston and vibrant local art scenes, other cultural significance, and these walkable areas will make it easier for residents and tourists to explore the local landmarks and the historic sites, and that can boost tourism. Promoting walking reduces the number of cars on the road. That can ease traffic congestion. Investments in pedestrian-friendly infrastructure can reduce long-term maintenance costs because you have to put maintenance on roadways, especially when there's a lot of traffic, which we see in cities that beats up the road and the asphalt. And when we see car-centric urban planning, of course, you got to invest in traffic lights and street signs and so on. And that can minimize wear and tear on existing transport networks if you promote and build pedestrian-friendly infrastructure. Part C, describe a piece of qualitative data that Boston urban planners could use to determine the extent of walkability across the city. So how can urban planners determine if a place is walkable? That's what the question is asking. It's asking specifically for qualitative data. Quality. This is data that doesn't deal with numbers. That's quantitative data, the prefix quantity. So we're looking at qualitative data that doesn't deal with numbers. What could urban planners do to determine the walkability in different areas of Boston or Boston as a whole? They could go to Beacon Hill and see, okay, is this area walkable? How does that compare to South Boston or North End or Dorchester and Roxbury? So let's look at some possible examples here. Urban planners could gather qualitative data through surveys or interviews. They can ask residents how safe, accessible, how pleasant they find walking in different neighborhoods. They could ask where do they go if they walk? Where do they have to drive to? Planners can conduct field observations and note foot traffic patterns. They could see, are there a lot of people walking? Is there a lot of traffic congestion right now? Are sidewalks being used? Are people choosing to walk over other forms of transportation? They could have local forums or town hall meetings where residents can discuss issues like sidewalk conditions, safety, and accessibility that can provide valuable qualitative data inside the walkability of the city. Pictures capturing street conditions like sidewalk quality, crosswalk visibility, and pedestrian amenities can visually illustrate and provide walkability information. Is it easy or very accessible for residents to walk around the city? Are there challenges to walkability within the city? Part D, explain one way that gentrification may increase walkability. So first we have to know what gentrification is. So what is gentrification? That's when a private investor comes in and develops an underdeveloped part of a city. So it raises the standard of living and the cost of living. They usually put in mixed-use development with residential facilities and business facilities as well. They kind of modernize the area to increase that standard of living, to increase the charm of it. And it also increases the property values and increases the costs of living. So how can gentrification, how can this investment increase walkability? Well, gentrification can bring for funding for sidewalks, lighting like street lights. It can also lead to crosswalks across the street. It makes neighborhoods safer and more accessible for pedestrians, thus increasing walkability. Gentrified areas see the rise of mixed-use developments with combined housing, retail, and services, all in close proximity, so you don't need a car to get from place to place. So that reduces your reliance on an automobile and encourages walking. Gentrification can lead to the creation of parks, outdoor seating, public spaces that make the area more enjoyable and more appealing to being outside and to walking. We'd also see that the investors may invest in transit hubs or public transportation networks in gentrified areas. So that would be buses, metros, trains, other public transportation services. I'm emphasizing public. That doesn't include taxi cabs and that doesn't include private vehicles. We want to see a decrease in those if we increase walkability here. So we're not eliminating all forms of transportation here, but we're really eliminating cars and car usage and making walking a more viable and more accessible option here. Part E, explain one criticism of urban sustainability initiatives that residents of Boston may address. So just when we put in walkability, we put in walkable spaces, when we put in green belts, when we put in mixed-use developments, all of these are considered parts of urban sustainability initiatives. What's a possible consequence? What's a criticism that residents may address when implementing these forms of urban planning here? So urban sustainability projects like green space developments, like with green belts, or gentrification, or walkability can drive up the property values because the standard of living is going up. That can also raise rents, and that can push out longer term or lower income residents. Sustainability initiatives often focus on wealthier or more visible neighborhoods or already more developed neighborhoods, and that can lead to underserved or less economically developed communities without the same improvements. And that leads to inequality in development. It leads to environmental injustice. It leads to inequalities in walkability and infrastructure and environmental quality as well. We can see that some projects emphasize beautification, like parks or building bike lanes, while ignoring more urgent needs like affordable housing and public transportation. Essentially, they're making the area look nice, but not actually addressing issues related to the people or related to the businesses within the community. Construction and redevelopment tied to sustainability projects can lead to noise and traffic congestion. It can lead to closures of streets and businesses, and that can inconvenience current residents as well. This is a very simple thing, but it is something that residents of Boston may address. Okay, you're going to be closing this main road. How am I supposed to get to work now? That's a major concern because people have to get to work. So these are some basic concerns here that residents may address. When answering this prompt, you can put yourselves in the people of Boston. Put yourself in their shoes. What if this was happening in your town or in your city? What consequence may you think of? What's something that you may address at a town meeting here? Oh my gosh, they're closing the road. what am I going to do now? They're closing a lane. When they're expanding lanes in rural areas, that usually leads to road closures, and that can lead to major traffic congestion. Part F, explain one reason for why federal states like the United States may address and act upon urban sustainability and walkability over a unitary state. So first off, what's the difference between a unitary and a federal state? A federal state has shared power between the national government and the local or regional governments. A unitary state has centralized, concentrated power in the national government here. So how does that relate to urban areas? How does that relate to urban sustainability and walkability? Well, a federal state has those regional and local governments, and they're more likely to address local issues like a local city over a unitary state that's going to address the country as a whole, not really just one individual city or one individual place. And that results in more uniform policy. In a federal state that's usually bigger, like the United States here, we see that policy is more inconsistent and varies depending on what state or region or city that you're located in, because they have different needs and different issues and different priorities. So let's relate this and answer the question. So federal states allow local governments to tailor policies for urban sustainability and walkability to their specific cities, to their specific regions, to their specific needs for their communities. The communities will vary, giving them more flexibility compared to unitary states that have more centralized control. Another response could have been that in a federal system, local governments have experimented with urban sustainability initiatives like green spaces or bike lanes. The examples aren't needed, but they're good to include, and there's other examples that may not be implemented at a national level in unitary states. So that kind of relates to the idea that unitary states implement everything at a national level. Well, federal states do it at a more regional or local base. Federal states can address urban issues like walkability more quickly at a local level, because unitary states have to pass policy at the national level, and that involves going through the federal government, and that involves going through the legislative branch and then the executive branch that may have more turmoil, may have more longer processes, and it may just take longer to get the majority vote to pass this legislation. However, in a federal state where you have those regional local governments here, it's going to be probably a lot more quicker to pass policy for those regional or local areas, because you have a lot less bodies to go through, and you have people representing the interests of that local area that also have increased desire to address these issues. They feel more connected to these issues because it's in the local area that they're representing. All right, part G, explain the degree that walkability rates in South End would differ in Boston's edge city, Foxborough. So where is South End? Let's locate it here on the walk score and the population density map. I provided you a map with the different regions of Boston. You're welcome. So where is South End? It's near the north area. Yes, it's tricky. I did that on purpose. Well, ha ha ha. So South End, it's located near South Boston. It's located near Bay Village, Back Bay, kind of in that northern central region of the entire city here. And we can look at the walk score and the population density. We see that it's close to, the middle here of the northern end. So it has a pretty high walk score and a pretty high population density compared to the rest of Boston. It's pretty close to the central business district of Boston. So that means that it's going to have a lot of walkability because everything is so close together. We would assume that with an urban area, the walkability is going to be higher because the density is higher and you have a lot more people and a lot more infrastructure compared to an edge city that's usually located along a beltway. They're going to have a little bit less dense development, a lot more horizontal development over vertical development, a lot less population density. So just from the top of my head, I would say that the edge city, Foxborough, would have a lower walkability rate compared to South End. So the difference would be high. So when you answer any explain the degree question, the first thing that you should write on your paper, or I guess type on the AP exam, is that the degree is either high or low. The degree of relevancy. How true is it that South End's walkability differs from the edge city? It does differ because it's an edge city compared to the central business district. So it's a high degree of relevancy. It's very true. Now you have to back yourself up. Give the who, what, when, where, why, how. It's an argumentative prompt. So back yourself up and say why it's a high degree. Why is the walkability rates in South End going to differ compared to the edge city, Foxborough? There's a variety of reasons. Let's touch on them. So Foxborough, as an edge city, has lower urban density compared to the south end. Its layout with larger spaces are a lot less connected and more spread out will limit walkability and the accessibility to walk. Infrastructure in Foxborough is designed for car travel. We see that the edge cities are located along beltways, which are interstate highways, so more people are going to have cars, and they're going to be commuting there utilizing the beltway. So there's going to be parking spots, there's going to be lots of roads, so the infrastructure is going to be very car-centric. We see office parks, retail developments, and residential areas that do exist there. They're going to be spread out, making walking less convenient, unlike the south end, which is more compact. It's a more urban layout that's going to promote pedestrian activity. Foxborough offers commercial and retail spaces, but lacks the density and the variety of restaurants, shops, and services that we see here with mixed-use developments that's developed in cities, especially in gentrified areas, that encourage and promote walking and accessible pedestrian activity that we see here in South End. Foxborough's limited public transportation options. We see that edge cities, and the further away you get from the CBD, the less transportation options you have here. At least public transportation options will decrease. Public transportation options are going to be most abundant and accessible the closer you are to the central business district, and South End is closer to the central business district, so it's going to provide greater access to public transit, and so that's going to make walkability in the edge city a lot less abundant and a lot less promoted. Foxborough is going to be a lot more car oriented. So we finished the FRQ. What key terms should we take away here? What key terms did we discuss? We discussed walkability. That's the measure of how easy and safe it is for people to walk in an area, how accessible it is for pedestrian activity, and that considers factors like pedestrian infrastructure and just distance to where you're going. I'm not going to walk 5 miles to the grocery store. Mixed-use developments. That's development that integrates a variety of different usages in a single plaza or single building, like residential facilities, such as apartments, commercial facilities, like businesses, sometimes even industrial spaces as well. Gentrification. It's the process where you have an investor come into a low-income or underdeveloped community, and they develop in it. They invest in it. They put in mixed-use developments. They invest in infrastructure and roads and sometimes pedestrian facilities. They invest in parks, and that results in an increased property value, and that can lead to the displacement of existing residents because rent values usually go up, property costs go up, and that can also lead to changes in the neighborhood's character and charm, and a change in the culture and the sense of place as well. We talk about urban sustainability. That's the concept of creating urban spaces that meet the needs of current residents. When we're talking about sustainability, so it means they're also preserving resources and minimizing any type of environmental harm or impact for the future generations. And Edge City, this is an area located along a beltway with high concentration of office buildings, retail spaces, other amenities. We see a lot of business activity here, not a lot of residential activity, but we see a lot of activity that's traditionally found in city centers that promotes economic development here. There's a lot of job opportunities in edge cities, and they surround the central business district of a city like Boston. We see this a lot in North America, and we can connect this to the galactic city model. And something to note here, there's a lot of economic activity, but maybe not a lot of residential population. Because it's located along a major transportation route, a beltway, people can commute there from either the inner city or a suburb or a boomburb. We also talk about federal systems. These have power shared between the national and local governments, and there's more localized control over urban planning and sustainability initiatives because they're addressing the local or regional needs. However, a unitary state centralizes most of the power in the national government. Walkability is often linked to public transportation options. We see that when we increase walkability, we decrease car dependence. In areas that have good transit connections, such as with subways or buses, people are going to walk more because it's easier to navigate the city and access a range of destinations that can be close or further away from where they're located. Edge cities are centers of commerce and businesses located along the periphery of a city, but exurbs are more residential, and they're rural areas located even further from the urban core. Usually they're still connected by some form of fashion of a transportation route, like a road or an interstate, but we see that edge cities are, of course, located further. They're going to be more dense. They're going to have higher land values. They're going to have more economic activity. And so the difference between edge cities and exurbs is something that I'm asked a lot. So I wanted to provide this distinction here to clear up any confusion that you may have. Thank you so much for watching. Please like and subscribe. It really does help me out, and it costs $0. I have some free resources for you in the description down below if you'd like to use them. If you have any AP Human Geography related questions whatsoever, don't hesitate to leave a comment down below the video or send me a message on Discord. I'll see you guys in the next video, though. Adios.